Hello and welcome to Deft and Dorky. We're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Hello.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
It's
We're
dungeon
gonna talk
time.
about it.
Went separate ways on that one, but it's okay.
What? What about for my jingles? From now on, I'm just gonna steal from other notable corporate jingles.
That's the best way to do it, really. Uh,
Yep.
we're back. We're going to talk about D&D stuff. Today we last time we talked about like the makings of a good player. Today we're going to talk about what makes a good DM.
Something that neither of us know anything about
Yep, no idea.
because we're bad.
Um, so
What do we not do?
I guess to start off, what is there a particular hallmark? Like, is there a big, or is there a top thing or a top couple things? Do you think?
I think chiseled good looks.
Absolutely, of course.
If I'm gonna have to stare at your face for the majority of the time, I want that lustrous hair. Um, I mean, like I think that it's so fleeting. For those of you listening to the podcast, Isaac and I just brushed our hands through our lustrous hair. That's definitely what just happened.
I had long hair for a little while, and I didn't like it, so I cut it off.
I had long hair once. Now it's all just thin. So, okay. What hallmarks of good DM? So one thing that I thought of is just that, like, gosh, a DM just like makes it fun for everybody. You know what I mean? Like they figure out how to make it fun for everyone. And I was talking with my wife about this because she's been a part of 2 tables that I've DM'd for. And like I was talking about, like we kind of got some of our friends into it for just a short time, and we just really haven't played it since, just because life, and also I don't know that they're necessarily interested in carrying it on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling her, it's like it's so interesting because I think the kind of DM or the kind of fun that they were having is very different than the kind of fun that we have in our other table. Mm-hmm. And I wish I would have just kind of leaned into that. And like we only played 3 to 5 sessions, I think. And I was just like, I wish sessions 4 and 5 would have focused on the things that they like. I mean, I think that's just part of what being a DM is and does. I being a nubile, is that the right word? I'm gonna be really embarrassed if that's not the right word. Nubile. Whoa.
Yeah,
not the right word.
You keep using
of a young
I do not think it means what you think it means.
adjective. Number 1, of a young woman sexually attractive. Number 2, of a young woman sexually mature, old enough for marriage. Hey, sorry,
Newbie. Newbie.
Novice. Yeah. Neophyte. That's another one. I think that's a neophyte. Is this also a dangerous word?
I don't know.
A person who is new to a subject, skill, or belief. That is a good word for it. You know, just like one of those things, like, for those of you that are DMing and new to it, like, if you're like me, my experience has been, I feel like I have learned exponentially in a very short time, because there's just so many lessons to learn in such a short time. And I think when you play, some of these things are just like obvious, like, oh yeah, well we should do this, or like, why isn't he doing that, or whatever, right? But when you're actually running the stuff, it's so challenging to keep all of the plates in your head spinning.
Yes.
And so, like, one of the overarching themes that I think of is just like, okay, just go back to it being fun. Like, what is fun for everyone here? Mm-hmm. And lean into that and make sure that that fun is in congruence with what everybody thinks is fun. And if it's not, like, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, yeah, obviously if you're not having a good time, then why are you there? So I think, okay, trying to decide how I want to word this, because I I think. Well, I mean, yeah, I think that I've DM'd more than I've played overall. I think it's close. Um, but I also want to talk about like what makes a good DM from the perspective of a DM, not only from the perspective of a player. And we've talked about this before. The DM is also a player, right? It's also there to have a good time as well. So when I DM, and it's hard to nail down because I do want all the players to have a good time. I also want to have a good time myself. So when I am, because the way that I run the bigger campaigns is there's like so much going on, and there's not only the plates that I have to spend for the players, there's all the plates that I have to spend for the world and also for all the NPCs within the world. Mm-hmm. And like finding the stuff that is satisfying as a DM is also important, because if you're always catering everything to all of your players and it's not in line with what you enjoy, then I feel like you're going to burn out pretty quick. Mm-hmm. So finding a way to sort of sew those things together, I think is also a mark of a good DM. Being able to take those parts that you as a DM find interesting in the game and match it up with the parts that you're playing, because you have to make sure that you're getting something out of it. Otherwise, like I said, you're going to burn out, and then it's not going to be fun for anyone.
And you've DM'd some long ones. Like how many? I want to look this up.
Over 60, I think, on both of them.
Which, I mean, like, you play every Monday night, but then there's always, like, I don't know, we probably played them, average, like 2.5 times a month?
Probably something like that.
So, maybe a little more.
I mean, it's well over 2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that, like, and I guess those are the broad strokes. Then we kind of want to get into the weeds a little bit. But yeah, as far as the broad strokes go, I think that obviously, if you want your players to have fun, you want to make sure you are getting something out of it as well. And even like finding the right table can be, well, I don't know. I guess if you're a really good DM, I would imagine that you can take like the best DMs in the world. I would imagine can take any table and make it fun for them. However, I don't know that even the best DMs in the world could take any table and do it for a long period of time.
Yeah. Especially if your table is comprised of a bunch of teenagers. I feel like DM should be like a personality type on those like interest inventories. You know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. Oh, you did the Myers-Briggs. What'd you get? DM. Because I really do think it takes a certain type of personality. But I want to ask you this: do you, like, while we're on the topic of like burning out, mm-hmm. like, you've DM'd some long campaigns, 260+ campaigns. Mm-hmm. That's pretty long, like 2 years. Yeah. We've been playing since like the pandemic, and it's 2024.
Yeah, actually, yeah, because we started right before lockdowns occurred. Was when I started. So yeah, it's been 4 years essentially.
Do you ever like feel burnout?
I will say that there have been like I can count on one hand, but there have been sessions where I've not been necessarily looking forward to it, and it's just because there's stuff that's either I've got too much going on in my actual life to concentrate to fully focus in on what I need to focus in on, or it's just like come to a part where it's not meshing with what I had envisioned, and it's rubbing the wrong way. And it's I mean, in every one of those it's gone fine once I've gotten into it and done it. But as far as like just complete burnout, I don't think that I really have. And part of that is due to the fact that okay, so I should back up a little bit here. I think that because I write my own campaigns and don't go out of a book. What are you laughing at?
I've been stuck on rubbing it the wrong way.
Okay.
Like David, you know.
So because I write my own and don't go out of a pre-made, that is pretty satisfactory for me. Moving a story along, especially when it is superb whenever a story beat gets hit and a player gives me something that I wasn't anticipating, but that also fits just as well, if not better, than what I had originally envisioned.
Right.
That will drive me for another year, basically. But yeah, I don't think that I've ever really felt burnt out about. Yeah, it does.
That should be. We should make that another episode. Just like how to write your own campaign. Like how do you get into the deep waters away from the kiddie pool of the pre-writtens? You know.
Yeah, we should totally do that. I'll write that down.
That would be interesting.
But yeah, I think so. To get into the weeds a little bit more, I think that like sort of traits of a good DM, the things that you want to see, and not all of these do I do to my own satisfaction, but the ability to describe things, because it's all, you're never going to be there. The ability to accurately like paint a picture for someone so that they feel like they're in this place with you is a very good quality. It's something that I am still trying to work on, and I think I'm getting better at it, but it's still certainly not where I would like it to be. But yeah, the ability to describe things in a manner that people will latch on to it and be there with you in that moment, I think is very important. I think that like knowing a bunch of the rules is a really good thing.
It's a benefit.
Yeah, it's not a necessity, but I like the more rules that you can quickly make a judgment on and keep the pace of the game going, I think is good. I think that helps to make a good DM.
And if not that, like at least have the decisiveness to like, this is how we're going to do it. You know?
Yeah. And that's, you're never going to remember all the rules. Like there's too many like different little conflicting things that you're never going to remember all of them. But yes, being able to just make a decision. And then if you go back, and I've done this, if you go back and look into it after the session and it's wrong, you can be like, okay, that was a special time, but that's not going to, we're not going to do that anymore. But I think
you gotta have your source books nearby, D&D Beyond open, and then your Twitter full of Jeremy Crawford.
At Jeremy Crawford.
Yep.
Hey, I'm playing D&D right now, Jeremy Crawford. Could you make a ruling for me, please?
Like, quickly, too. Like,
time's ticking here. Yeah, what else? What do you think?
I think a DM has to be able to play a very delicate line between flexibility and rigidness. Like, you've got to be able to be a little bit of an improvisational jeez, words, man. You gotta improv, and you gotta improv well. Yeah, sorry, I just heard something. I was like, I shouldn't be able to hear anything with where I'm at in my house. And it's like, what is that? Anyway, sorry guys.
That happened last time. Like, there's a ghost in your room.
Yeah, I swear there was something. Or a mouse. That's probably more real. Like,
no.
No, not in the Midwest, in the basement. No. I think that you've got to be able to improv a little bit. Like, you have a setting, not necessarily a story. I mean, call it whatever you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ideally, you've created something that you can share, and it can be interacted with as a party. Like, not just like an adventuring party, but like the DM plus the players. Like, there is a setting, and they can have influence over the outcome of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there has to be a level of like, I'm willing to cede control over this so that my players can have an interactive experience. Simultaneously, like, where is the line of like too much or too little control that is being ceded over, right? Like, because I think that there is a delicate balance to maintaining whatever the dynamic is that is ideal for your table. Like, you've got to be able to make sure that you're not just like yes-anding everything, because it's like, okay, there comes a limit, and you got to find where that limit space is, you know, and be able to make it fair. Like, you know, oh, I want to do this. It's just like, you can try that, but it's going to be next to impossible to pull off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. That's like, you can try that, but even if you nat 20, it's not going to go exactly how you're anticipating.
Right.
You can make a dent here, but you're not going to just be able to break it.
And being able to know how to like take that, right? Like, a classic example that everybody talks about is just like, I'm the bard that persuades the king to give me his kingdom, or whatever crazy thing, right? It's like, oh, I got a nat 20, so he gets to. It's like, how do you roll with that? It's just like, well, the king doesn't cut your head off today. How's that? Like, you know. So I think being able to identify, like, okay, how do I let my players have control over the story and simultaneously keep it fun? Because, like, the threat of failure is one of the greatest tools that I think a DM has, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
it's
consequence for your actions need to matter. Like, I'll just say this, in our campaign, like, some of my favorite moments were not fun in the moment. Like, it's always in retrospect of like, oh, this is gonna be hairy. Like, you know what I mean?
Do you have an example?
I mean, we were kind of getting smoked in that final fight.
Yeah.
Or at least it felt like it. And we kind of like figured it out. Like, we did this choice. It was fun. We had this like, I'm gonna banish somebody, and then someone banishes me. It was like this Matryoshka doll. Like, that was one of my favorite D&D moments ever. But like, we were really getting smoked, sure. And it was like, we are losing people, and I don't want to like give all the context of what happened in it because it's too much time. But like, we beat this big bad guy, and then that big bad guy possessed one of our guys. It was like, oh, okay, cool, we're fine. This is fine. We're good. Oh, crap. Like, phase 2 is happening, and we are out of resources. And it's like, we are maybe all gonna die. But it turned out great.
Yeah, I mean, that's that. There you go. That's, I mean, another good measure of a good DM is being able to balance those things to where it feels it. I mean, as a DM, you never actually want your party to die. No. That's never the goal, but you want them to feel like it is a possibility. Yeah. And sometimes,
and that it's okay.
Yeah, losing one character is, you know, that might happen. I don't think any DM actually ever. Well, I never want a TPK in my party. Because I've put work into like incorporating those characters into the story. I don't want them all to die. That's not fun. Right. But like, making the threat feel real is also very important.
Well, to your point though, like, I think that's another element, is like the willingness to let go. You know, like, you do a lot of work. Same thing with the players. Like, I made this cool backstory. I'm invested, but like, there's always another backstory that I'm really eager to get into. And just recognizing that, like, hey, this is part of the story, you know? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Which is really easy to say, especially as the DM. Like, I don't know. Anytime I crit one of my players, I'm always like, I am so sorry. Like, genuinely, I wish that was a 19 instead of a 20. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
But
sometimes I feel that way, and then other times I feel like the chips are down. Let me see it. Show me how you're going to get out of this. I want to
yeah,
know.
good for once. Struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's obviously a very challenging line to walk, but I do think that good DMs manage to find the liminal space that they should reside in for that. So
Yeah. And like it's not we've talked about like being a good player and being a good DM, but there's also just that the sort of space between where there's a just a good relationship between the DM and the player, and I think that is also very important. I think that you can have a good player, like a good what someone would describe as a good player and what someone would describe as a good DM, and if they aren't on the same page, the session can still go poorly. I think
right.
that the just sort of having that it's hard to describe. There's an ineffable quality
Yeah.
to that relationship, that if it's working, it's working well, and if it's not, then it's not. And I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to work on that, but the more effortless that is, the better time I think you're going to have as well.
Communication skills are paramount.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you were talking about something that I don't remember. I was going to say something about, but now I've lost it.
Improv.
Improv. That is what I was going to talk about.
Oh.
That is something that I feel like I am still working on. Certainly, in the first campaign I ran, I think I've gotten quite a bit better at this point than I was then. Yeah, the first campaign I wrote, I would write, and I would have a vision for how the story was going to go, taking into account just a handful of variables, and then if when it inevitably didn't go down one of those roads, I would end up sort of panicking and sort of like, I'm gonna push this back onto one of these roads that I know where it goes.
Yeah. That's a safe direction in place.
Yeah. So my ability to improv it's gotten better since then, but I still think it could stand to get even better than that. So don't worry if you don't have all these qualities that we're talking about, because they're all things that can be developed and worked on.
Yeah.
And it's not always something that you can even like do on your own. Sometimes you have to go through it to get better. It's just experience.
Yeah. Experience is a really good teacher.
Yeah, experience. That's one of the things that typically makes a good DM is experience. Like the more you've done, the more. I think I've probably said this before, but like that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? Is experience. So it's knowing, just having an idea of how things can go, how things will go, and then actually experiencing how things can go and how things will go are very different. And I think that the more experience you have, the better you'll get with all of those things. And it may be uncomfortable sometimes to get that experience, but in my experience, experience is good.
Oh,
Tricky.
Experience. Level up.
Yeah. That's right. What about you?
Yeah.
Is there any other? Well, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about that because, like, I've only DM'd for a very short amount of time. Like, I think we're probably on session 12 or 13 in my Strahd campaign.
Okay.
Maybe. And then, like, only a handful of sessions for some friends and stuff like that. And it's funny because that experience factor, like I said, like, I feel like I learned exponentially, especially early on. It was just like, holy smokes. Because, like, I think that there's some elements of being a good DM that it's just, like, very nuts and bolts, nitty gritty. Not in the sense of, like, no, the rules and stuff, but, like, no, time management. Like, you got to run the clock on the game. And not like, oh, well, it's the next day or whatever, but, like, let's move, like, pacing is an important element of DMing a game. Like giving your players enough, letting them play with it, getting them more after they've played with it. Like I just feel like there were times where it was like, okay, I feel a lull, we're dragging, maybe there's boredom setting in, tiredness or whatever. It's like it's time for snacks, time for a bathroom break, and it's time for me to throw the goblin ambush at you. You know what I mean? It's like let's wake up and let's roll. And so like I think just like the experience of knowing like what are my players interested in? Like when should I lean into whatever they're throwing at me, and when do I need to hit them with like, because I think, you know, people are always like, oh, it's on the rails. It's like, no, you need a little bit of direction in everything that you do. Like objectives, quests, a place for them to go to. Like, oh, it's on the rails that you're sending us to this cool forbidden temple. Like, yes, but are you having fun? Yeah. And like you need something to do. Like there has to be an inciting incident, and if you're going to call that being on the rails, it's like, well, welcome to any medium of entertainment. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and we talked a bit about that before the the rails argument. Sort of the thing that I figured out to do is give the players the reason to do it and not make them do it, and it tends to go a little better. It makes them feel like they're making the choice, even though it is the only choice to make.
The only choice.
Yeah, if you give them the reason instead of being like, "Oh, you go here now." And the time management thing you were talking about is definitely the thing that I've gotten better at. In the first campaign, I would plan out, you know, a thing and be like, I think this will, you know, roughly take up the time, and then it would like, I'm expecting that to last, you know, the full session, 1 or 2 hours or whatever, and it's done in 5 minutes. I'm like, well, what else do I have that I can quickly pull up and, you know, move on? It's, again, through experience, I've gotten better at trying to sort of estimating how long things will take and having the next step ready.
Like that is something. So I drive my wife nuts, I think, sometimes, because I'll be like, I really have to do something. Like I got to do a lot of prep, and she's like, Brian, after every session, you always say that we did not get anywhere near as far as you thought that we would. And I think that as a DM, like you need to do yourself some sort of, so okay, I'm my only table right now is a pre-written Curse of Strahd. And I think as a DM, if you're doing a pre-written, you're going to do yourself a lot of service if, yes, read the book through. Have like a bit of a map of like what's going on in that world. But then if you can get a sense for how long your sessions are going to take, don't prep much beyond that. Because like you need to be able to have the flexibility to say like, oh, they zigged when I thought that they zagged, and I can just let go of maybe what I would have invested a lot of time and energy into, because I knew that like, okay, we're probably gonna have a combat here, or like they're in the middle of this area, like they're probably gonna be in this kind of circumstance. This is gonna take 3 hours, so I don't need to worry about preparing what's in hour 4 or 5 or 6, because they might just F that all up. And I don't want to be beholden to it because I put time into it, you know?
Yeah, and speaking to the like how much time you take to prep and sort of plan out these things, the big thing that I would, so prep is an important thing.
Yes.
The problem that I have prepping with a pre-written as opposed to prepping from my own is that so let's say that you think your players are going to get 2 hours session and they're going to get, you know, X amount of farness into it.
Right.
The prep for a pre-written, for me, the hard part is, okay, all the NPCs that are going to come along in this potential 2 hours, even if you nail that, what does each of these NPCs know? Because that becomes a thing to where it's, if I haven't read through the entire book and can hold it like the overall, the broad strokes of it in my brain, then they may ask a question and I'll be like, and I have to, go to the book. Oh, this NPC knows X, Y, Z. Whereas when I'm writing my own, and I think we probably talked about this before. I say that a lot. But if I'm writing my own, I already, I know, I wrote this character. I know what he knows, or what this character at least has a chance to know, or why they would know a certain thing.
You gave birth to them.
And that makes prep for me a lot easier in the things that I write myself than it does for a pre-written.
I could see that. I could see that 1,000%. But if you're doing a pre-written, it has been interesting because that's something. Okay, if you're going to DM and you're gonna do a pre-written, you need to write your own book in a way. The module's great, but there's so much information you do not need or you will want to be flexible with. And so I you don't have this problem. If you were to read Curse of Strahd, this 240-page book or whatever, there's part of me that really wishes I had a hard copy of it because I would just mark the crap out of it.
Yeah.
And I would have sticky notes all over the place because it's you really do need to dumb it down. There's just okay, there's this 1-page dossier on who Strahd is, and what I want to do is I want to have his stats, and on the back of it, 7 bullet points. This is what Strahd knows. Bingo. That's all. Yeah. Because there's just too much content and information. So I think from someone who's currently doing it, if you're doing a pre-written, you need to take the time to essentially abridge the pre-written for yourself. And in some ways it makes it shorter. There are other times when I'm wow, I really fleshed this part out because I felt like I needed it. But I would argue that helps you get off of well, the book said that this is the way it works. It's no, I can get away from the necessities of this is where the book is going by doing a bit of an abridgment and giving myself my own personal version of it. But yeah, if you're not doing a pre-written, you don't have that problem maybe.
Yeah, I've only done a comparatively very small amount of pre-written stuff, but I definitely feel if I were to do pre-writtens, I would essentially read through them, get the gist of it, and then have it as a reference, but run it as my own. Just have an idea of and I feel that's harder to do because they're not from me. There's not it's not. I can't go back to my procedurally generative brain and be oh, well, I wrote this. This is what it would be.
Right. Yeah.
But certainly, if I was going to run a pre-written, I think that I would read through it and then have an idea of how things were going to go through me, just to make that easier. So it's not because I definitely feel if I did not make that exception for myself, that it would feel very clunky because I would be very concentrated on getting it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that helps or hurts anyone listening, but
makes sense.
That is what I would do.
Yeah. It's funny because there's perceptions of what a good DM is too, and some that are I think are myth, being able to balance things. The DM is the referee, and it's important for them to make sure that nobody gets too busted. And in a weird way, I'm just kind of well, okay, you turn this knob, turn that one. In my Strahd campaign, I gave my players some really powerful magic items, maybe a little bit too early. And my brother's dude, you gave us too much too soon. And I'm well, I'm just gonna tweak your monsters that you're fighting to match it. Yeah. I have these level 5 glass cannons running around, that miss. And I'm all right, well, this monster, his AC is now 2 higher, and its saving throw is a little bit beefier, and it's probably gonna not hit as hard, and maybe have a little bit more of a lovely HP pool. I don't know. Some people are well, you can't do that. That homebrew will be too broken for your player. It's well, just adjust and adapt.
Yeah, Yeah, you
Which
can
is more
definitely
work
do
for
that.
you, but
It is, and I mean, it's something you can absolutely do. If, on the other hand, don't be afraid to come back and be like, I know I gave you this. We're gonna balance it a little bit though,
yeah.
especially on things that are like essentially being play tested. They aren't like official things. Like I did that with some of the Vonix stuff. Like I gave him those gauntlets, and the way we sort of tweaked his class and subclass a little bit ended up being super strong. And I came back and was like, yeah, this is too much. You're way out of line with the power level of the rest of the party, which makes balancing fights weird. Doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it weird. So we're going to tone you down just a little bit. And, because it was like those were homebrew things and I'd already talked to him about it. And I was like, we can try this. I want to try this. But I reserve the right to come back and turn it down a little bit.
Yeah.
And we were like both like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, just keeping an eye on things, and it's all communication. That's the key earmark of a good person.
Good person. Yeah, I wanted to say like, hey, we're talking about this. This is going to come up eventually. Everybody says this in every kind of thing that talks about this. Be a good communicator. Okay, now we can move back to things that are actually interesting to talk about and not super generic and boring.
Yeah.
Not that it's not important. It's just, it's like you got to be a good communicator. It's like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of those things that when people say it, I'm like, oh god, he's talking about that again.
It's the panacea for everything. It's just like, guys, like, come on. Let's come up with something a little bit. Let's turn the rock over in a new way a little bit.
Yeah, what else? Do you have anything that's like any specific thing that you think when you see a DM do it, you're like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah. Like I think that finding a way to continuously make it a game. Like let's say someone is like, I want to do this. Like I don't want to make my players roll for everything. But if they're going to throw something out, I want to be like, okay, cool. How do we like add stakes to this situation? Yeah. Right? Like, how do we make this interesting? Because really, when you play D&D, all we're there to do is gamble. It's just, it's not with money. It's with like narrative stakes, right? So like the times that I've ever like, especially when I've like listened to like Dimension 20 or Critical Role, like the times where I was like, that was super cool. I would say that about half of them are moments where somebody suggested something. I was like, I want to do this. And someone's able to say like, okay, then this is how I'm going to rule it. Like, I want you to roll this kind of check. And it's just like, I never would have thought to roll. Like, that's too basic of an example, but like, allowing there to be more of the element of the game involved in it. You know what I mean? And you don't have to like break your mechanics of it, but like that's something I wish I did more often. So it's like, okay, you crit, awesome, describe it for me. And they tell me this kind of cool thing, and it's just like, that's so awesome. I am also going to make it so that the enemy is now prone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I want there to be a level of like weaving in the mechanics to everything, because at the end of the day we're there to play a game, and the narrative and story is super important, obviously, but like I am grateful for the rules because I think that makes the game, so I can handle the narrative part, but like this extra part over here, the game mechanics, weaving that in an interesting way, I think is important.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. I think also something you said reminded me of this is making failures not be a game over scream.
Yeah.
If you can take a failure, and because I think that failures are often way more interesting than successes. If you can take a failure and make it have a consequence that is not, oh, you lose, that's it.
Right. Yeah.
Then that is that is very nice as a player.
Fairness.
Whenever it's if I fail something and it's not like, oh well, you're dead now.
Right.
If it's like, oh well, you failed, this happens, what do you do now? Those are very nice. I think that's a good quality to have, is being able to like roll with the failures. I also think, and this is going to be more table to table dependent, but like committing to the bit of like, if you are voicing an NPC and you're doing, especially if you're doing a different voice for them, like commit to it. Don't wuss out in the middle of it.
Yeah. Go for it, dude.
Like, even if it's terrible and everyone, if it's just keep doing it. That's just the way they talk now. It doesn't matter if it sounds weird. If you do it enough, people will be like, oh, that's just how they talk. Isn't that great?
Don't be ignorant and make fun of this person. That's how they are. Yeah, that's pretty good.
I really like that whenever they just stick to it. Just keep doing it. I might laugh at you the first time, but do it anyway, because I'm gonna settle into it and it's gonna be good.
I think the DMs also have a level of like dynamic, like it's a little bit connected to the improv element, but like utilizing, how do I say this? Like utilize the strength of D&D. Like allow for the players to push the boundaries of this thing. Like, hey, I'm gonna clip through that wall and it's not gonna break the game because it's D&D and not a video game. And like, okay, cool, yeah, let's run that way. Like, I think a little bit of like, this is an argument for like avoid the rails, if you will. But there's just kind of an element of like, okay, cool, yeah, like this is a living, breathing world. You guys disrupted the supply chain for like potion makers, and now the economy is affected by it. Like the world has changed. Like utilize the strengths that the game gives you. Like, okay, you guys went off the map. Like I gave you a map, and you just went across the southern border. There's not an invisible wall there. You are now walking into a new place, and next session I will share with you what it looks like. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think that, like, I think good DMs leverage what this game can give people.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Like you said, like trying to like get it in my brain how I want to say that's exactly what but yeah, like the understanding of, like I said, improv and pacing.
Yeah.
I think being able to, and it's hard to do because it's not obviously only up to the DM. The pace is not only up to the DM, but having a good idea of how to nudge the pacing to a place where it doesn't remain static for too long.
Right.
I think is also good. And then again, it's going to be dependent on your table, but like, sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Incentivizing, RP.
Yeah.
I think is also a good thing. Like especially if you have a table where not everyone wants to RP, but one person or two people are super into it. I think that it's the mark of a good DM to like go with that. Like,
right.
Give that one person who wants to do that, give them more of the RP. Mm-hmm. And if the other people don't want it, give them less.
And I think a good DM can also help guide people through it too. Like, I love it when I hear DMs are like, oh, that's a cool idea. Do you want to like describe what it looks like?
Yeah.
Like, how does so and so fling their fireball? Or like, and if the person's like, I stab him, it's like, okay, I can back off this, but like at the same time, like I don't know, I like to push my players a little bit and just be like, oh, cool, like, yeah, tell me how this character would do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And let's see. I'm trying to think. There's any other like big point that I feel like I think of, but I'm missing, and I guess. I mean, I always want to say like compelling storytelling. Whether you run the whether you run a pre-written or your own, just being able to sell the story, I think, is a good thing. Which is not. That's like I think that's probably one of the harder things to do. Particularly if you're at a table where you haven't played with the people before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think. Go ahead.
Connected to that, I do think good DMs are well read, well versed. Like, borrow, like, get out there and like learn things about the world, about literary themes, about constructed narratives. Like, I think it can really help you if you have like awareness of like, oh, these are like prominent literary themes. Do I want to subvert this? Do I want to lean into this? Where do I mishmash it up against this? Can I develop a foil here? Like, you know, like good writers, I think, read a lot.
Yep.
Good
For sure.
movie, producers and directors, like, watch a lot of film. Like, get out there and like engross yourself in whatever genre you're interested in. Like, and don't be afraid to borrow it. It's like, oh, this is cool. This is an influence. You know what I mean? Like, artists influence one another.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we get more and more into this because there's more and more art, and so less and like the more you see, the less you're like sometimes feel like you can innovate because you see like, oh, everything's been done, and a lot of things have been done. That's just kind of the nature of it. The innovation, like occasionally there is some like true innovative thing that no one has ever seen, and it's not all the time is that going to be good. A lot of the time that kind of thing is going to flop and be made fun of and not be good.
Yeah.
But what comes from that is when people see that, they're like, oh, I see what they were trying to do here. I think I can improve upon that. I mean, look at the very first movies, right? Look at them now. They look awful. Exactly. Like, who would make a movie like that? If something like that came out today, it would be laughed at and be like, you spent money on this?
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time, it was a very big deal. So don't be afraid to experiment. And don't be afraid to take inspiration, especially like 99% of D&D games are for your own table. No one else is watching but your players.
Right.
Definitely don't be afraid to you can just completely take a story. Like, no one else is, it's not going to, there's no legal action going to be taken against you for running Lord of the Rings at your table.
Totally. And in fact, your players might really, really like that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a shared commonality, there's a fandom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that none of my players have played The Witcher 3 or Elden Ring because like I've literally used like, okay, cool. I'm going to borrow that clip and show that little anime. They've been like, oh, what was that from? And I was like, yeah, it's from this kind of like dumb little game. Nobody's ever heard of it. I have one more.
Okay. Hit me.
I think good DMs need to be able to have a hard conversation, which sucks. But like, I think you're the referee of the game in the sense that like, oh, I want to kick this door down. It's like, okay, cool. Here's the consequence. Like, roll for. You're that kind of referee, but you're also like, if something's wrong at the table, I think a lot of people like obviously players can handle things themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, that's an ideal world, but like sometimes that's not how it pans out. And I think as the DM, like, you're kind of the de facto leader, and it sucks. You're probably also the de facto scheduler, and you're probably also the de facto like snack bringer or host or whatever. But like the game doesn't happen without you 80% of the time.
I'd say 100% of the time.
Yeah, well, like it can't. It literally can't. But I just mean in the sense that like I think a lot of times DMs are the ones driving the bus on like, are we gonna play D&D again? You know?
Hmm. Yeah.
But I think that if there's an issue at the table, if there's a player that's kind of poo-poo in some way or another, is if you know, if the
Hmm.
experience isn't right for whatever reason, I think DMs should be ready and equipped to handle those challenging conversations. So,
Yeah. I agree with that, and that is probably the hardest part. And hopefully, you don't have to worry about that at your table because
mhm,
you've had those conversations before the game starts.
before the game starts,
But
before the game
everyone knows
starts,
that rarely is everything going to be ideal, and sometimes you're
yeah,
just wanting to play D&D and you just take what you have. Like,
yeah,
oh, my friend wants to play. That's enough to fetch it, a party. Like, oh, okay, let's try it. And then it can turn out bad, and you've got to make the decision. Like, do we proceed or do we not proceed?
yeah. Not all of your friends are good for your table, and not everyone for your table is good to be your friend.
Yep.
But hopefully, you luck out and get both. So.
Yep. Um, what do you think what's the thing that you are working on to become a better DM?
I mean, the thing, like letting go,
Okay.
like, you know, and there's an element of this too. Like, I guess I also am trying to like build in more options. Like, don't railroad your players. Okay. How? Like, answering that question is really hard. And so, like, in my DMing and prep, I've always been like, I want to give every scenario what I think are three potential ways out of it. And if my players come up with one beyond that, that's awesome. But like, you got to be able to give them enough to go off of. And so I think that like an element of like preparation is really where I'm trying to like getting a handle on how long things will take, getting a handle on like what's effective as far as creating enough content for whatever. Um, but also just like with preparation comes a willingness to let go. So, I mean, let go of a narrative, let go of a plot point, let go of a. Oh, yes, there was zigging when I thought there was zagging.
Hmm.
They're never going to see that castle again. Like figuring out how to like, okay, I can recycle this for later, but I can also say thank you. You were a beautiful part of my life for 1 week. Your services will no longer be needed.
Okay. Uh, yeah, I think that, like the biggest thing that I am still working on, I think, is, well, probably two things. One is like better describing things, because I always feel like whenever my players will arrive at a location, I have in my brain what it looks like, but
Right.
getting that image from my brain through my mouth into their brain is not always
Yeah.
functioning how I want it to function.
You might
So,
describe something as nubile on accident.
yeah, that could happen. So yeah, working on descriptions, and it's kind of delicate because I don't want to go into a description in a way where people are like bored with it within the first 10 seconds and no longer listening.
Yeah. That's hard.
So yeah, I try to like hit the yeah, finding that is the thing that I think I'm probably working. Well, it is a thing I'm working on, and it is probably the thing that I think that I do. It's the thing that I feel like I do the worst.
Mm.
I also am trying to work on improv. I feel like I've gotten significantly better at that, but it's still a thing that I am trying to improve upon. And that is just because the way I write it is predicated on certain things happening. So when something inevitably goes a way that I didn't anticipate,
Hmm.
being able to pick that up and be like, okay, how does that now fit into the rest of this web?
Right.
is the thing that I am trying to get better at. And like I said, I've made strides, but it's still not where I'd like it to be.
Yeah. I'll say it again. I've said this like 3 times tonight. Like, the amount that I learn every session is just insane. And it's like, I need to incorporate that for next time. Oh, that's a good lesson. It's just crazy. Like, if you don't DM yet, you should try it. It's a lot of fun. It is a lot of work, but it is a very rewarding, creative outlet. And man, every session I do, I'm like, okay, I got to remember that for next time. So.
All right. So in closing, I will ask you this: do you think that DMing makes you a better player?
Yeah.
In what way?
I think it makes you a more respectful player.
Okay.
Like, I think it... 2 things it does for me. One, like, it has deepened in my appreciation for what the DM does. So when I'm at your table, for example, it's just like, all right, I'm going to pay way more attention. You know, I mean, my notes got a lot better when I started DMing. And then 2, I think it just like... I think it just emboldened me even further to like go, play, talk, engage. Because it's just like, as a DM, it's like, please, I want you guys to take over this. Like, please just run with anything. And so now as a player, I'm just like before I was like, I don't want to dominate. I'm a little reticent to do this or whatever. No, now it's just like, I will, yeah, toy, awesome, let's do this, you know?
Yeah, I would say that for me, that like the sort of the DM in me as a player is when I'm playing a game and I see it seems like the DM is trying to hint at something. I definitely am trying to pick up on those things more so, I think, than if I had never DM'd. And then finding reasons for my character to really want to dig into whatever it is that is being hinted at.
It is funny you mentioned that specifically, because I have given up a little bit more on trying to figure it all out, because I'm just like, dude, as a DM, there's so much. And unless I'm just like pretty blatant about it, like sometimes I feel like it's whoosh. Like it is, I'm not saying I don't like want to try and figure it out, but there's also an element of like, ride the ride, Brian, because like maybe that's a clue, maybe that's not. It's really hard to know sometimes. So
yeah, that's for sure. And that's kind of what I mean, is like being able to. I'm always trying to look for those things that it's like the DM mentions something, and then I'll just go press on it a little bit and see if they give me anything more. And if they do, like, oh, I've got something here. And if they don't, I'm like, oh, that was just a nice description.
Right. Absolutely, 1000%.
Yeah, I think that we covered a lot. I don't know if we covered all of it, but we covered a lot. So yeah, we'll end it there, and we'll be back next week with something else. So thanks for chatting with me.
Next week with something else.
Thanks for listening / watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Goodbye.